That's a song by the DC Baltimore band Disastrous Consequences, and I implore you to check them out on Facebook and a couple other music-oriented sites they have accounts on. Check them out, they're really good. So thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the debut episode of the 13th Hour, the flagship episode, if you will. And we welcome you here to the home of all things weird and wonderful. We'd like to start this episode with some articles of interest from the news. And let's go to Colorado, where a Denver mailman mistaked a corpse for a Halloween decoration. From Reuters, the United States Postal Service acknowledged on Friday that one of its mail carriers did not report a corpse at a Denver home because he mistook the body for a Halloween display. Quote, "We do know the carrier delivered mail to the house that day, and he remembered seeing something he thought was related to Halloween," end quote, the Postal Service said in a statement. Quote, "When the carrier learned that this was not the case, he was shocked and extremely upset," end quote. The local ABC News affiliate reported that the dead man, a Dale Porch, aged 46, collapsed and died November 2nd on his porch steps after returning from his night shift job. Relatives of Porch could not be reached for comment by Reuters. The Postal Service called the incident, quote, "an unfortunate situation," end quote, "that would probably not have happened any other time of year." Quote, "Our carriers have a long history of assisting customers in neighborhoods across the country each and every day, and that holds true for our letter carriers here in Denver," end quote, the statement said. The unidentified carrier is a, quote, "dedicated employee," end quote, "who remains on the job," the post office said, "and any action that may be taken against him will be handled internally." That's something else, isn't it? Now let's move on to New York State, where in Albany, a man who lost his leg in a crucifix mishap is suing a church. From the Associated Press, David Jimenez was so elated over his wife's recovery from cancer that he offered to clean the large crucifix outside the Hudson Valley Church, where he spent many hours praying for her to beat the disease. On Memorial Day 2010, he was scrubbing grime off the cross when the 600-pound marble statuary toppled over, crushing his right leg. The then 43-year-old immigrant from Mexico was flown to Westchester Medical Center, where doctors had to amputate his injured leg. He's suing the Roman Catholic Church, where he was hurt, and early next year his $3 million lawsuit is scheduled to go to trial. Quote, "He attributed her recovery to his devotion to the cross and Christ hearing his prayers," end quote, Jimenez's lawyer Kevin Kitson of White Plains told the Associated Press. Kitson said he filed the lawsuit in March 2011 after the church denied it was liable for the accident that resulted in six-figure medical bills for Jimenez. The bills were paid by charitable foundations, Kitson said. The lawsuit is scheduled to go to trial in state Supreme Court in Orange County in January, Kitson said. That's pretty unfortunate there. Pretty unfortunate indeed. Some more weird news for you. In Billings, Montana, a man napping in a field was run over by a combine and survived. From the Associated Press. A man napping in a Montana cornfield was startled out of his snooze when he was run over by a large harvesting machine, and Yellowstone County deputies say he's lucky to be alive. Sheriff's Lieutenant Kent O'Donnell says the 57-year-old man had been traveling the country by bus and decided to take a rest 3 rows deep in a field on the outskirts of Billings, the state's largest city. A farmer harvesting Wednesday felt his combine hit something. When he turned the machine off, he heard screaming. Emergency responders found the man's clothing had been sucked into the cutter, ensnaring him in the blades. O'Donnell says the man, whose name was not released, suffered cuts requiring stitches and may need skin grafts, but the circumstances are incredibly lucky. And that ends our weird news segment for today's show. And now we're going to go over to a segment where we will read the paranormal experiences of friends of our show. I encourage anyone listening to message me over at the 13th Hours Facebook page or on our YouTube account or at an email address that will be provided in the description. Send me your stories, whether it be your ghost stories, if you've seen a flying saucer, camping trips with Bigfoot, swimming with the Loch Ness Monster, whatever it may be, I want to hear it. And if you want it read on the show, type up a summary, or let's make arrangements to have an interview over Skype, which will be broadcast in a future episode. So yeah, get at me. So let's go to our first paranormal story of the first show of the 13th hour. Now, before we carry on reading these stories from our listeners, I would like to ask our resident intern, Danny, to set the mood with some music. Danny? Danny? Just 1 second, folks. Danny, where the fuck is the music?
I'm sorry, I forgot to put it on. I was kind of spacing out there for a minute.
I don't pay you to fucking horse around.
Well, you don't really pay me at all.
What do you mean? Since when are college credits not fucking legal tender?
Like, I can't really buy food with college credits.
You fucking set up this goddamn music, otherwise I'm shipping you back to fucking Hackensack.
Alright, I'm sorry.
Alright, let's carry on with the stories. This tale comes from Kristen Connor of Delaware. Kristen writes, I moved into a remodeled Amish house about 12 years ago when I was 9 years old. The house was huge, and we have 2.1 acres of land with 3 separate buildings scattered on the property. No one told us why the house was so low priced or why the Amish family had to move out as quickly as possible, but my mom took the deal as a godsend, and we moved in. Breaking away from the story, it seems that all the best ghost stories seem to start that way, at least haunted house stories. The house that's price is too good to be true, and the family that fled beforehand. Back to the story. My room was in the upstairs part, right next to the attic. You literally have to walk through my room to get into the attic. This has always creeped me out, but I just ignored it. For the first few weeks, at least. After a few weeks, lights would start to turn themselves on in different rooms. Chairs would move in our kitchen, and you could hear things walking in the attic. I, of course, told my mother all about the things I heard, but she swore it was my imagination. Then one day, I was laying in my bed, and I could hear something tapping on my wall that connected my room to the attic. The tapping soon turned into scratching, which turned into pounding, which turned to me running downstairs to my mother's room. Another night, I had been taking a bath. The bathroom is connected to our kitchen, and my mother was the only one home, so I had the door open. I looked up into the doorway and saw a little boy with a blonde bowl cut and blue pants and button-up shirt walking past the door to the bathroom. He looked so real, and the Amish near our house were constantly walking through our yard, that I thought he had come into our house, and I yelled for my mom to help him. When she came running into the bathroom, she said, "Help who?" And I realized that she couldn't see him. After then, I kept the bathroom door closed. That was the only occasion that I have seen that particular ghost, although I have heard many in my house. It turns out that the Amish family that had lived in our house had lost 3 children in their duration of living here. One, a 10-year-old boy, was sucked up into farm equipment in one of our back fields. A 10-month-old baby girl choked on a popcorn kernel on our kitchen floor. And about 2 months before we moved in, the main reason for them having to move, their 3-year-old son was hit by a car right outside of our house. I frequently hear the children running up and down our stairway, and if it's late at night, all I have to do is tell them to stop playing around, and they usually stop. They aren't constantly active, but they are very curious about the things in our house, specifically the light switches and fire alarms. My house is not the only thing that is haunted on my property. The building that runs the length of our property was used by the owner of the house, who was a cabinet maker, as his shop. We use this concrete-floored building for storage. At any time of day or night, regardless of wind or weather, if you sit in that building, you will hear a person walk from one end of the building to the other end in the attic, with what sounds like very heavy boots on. I won't even go into the building, it just feels wrong in there, not like how it feels with the children in the house. Well, Kristen, that was a pretty chilling story. You ended your email to us saying you have more stories too, just not enough time to write them down at the moment. We look forward to hearing more stories, and and we hope to hear back from you soon. And now we move on to another story, this one from KD in New Jersey. This story involves not just ghosts, but astral projection. KD writes, "The years leading up to the attack were strange for me. I was young in 2004, about 12 years old, and I was opening new doors for myself to all kinds of new beliefs, and my interest in the unknown grew every day. I played with Ouija boards. I had my mother drop me off at the local cemetery so I could explore. In retrospect, how could I have not known the shit would eventually hit the fan? The events started happening in the summer when I was 12 and went until the fall of my 13th year. It started out innocent enough. We started seeing shadows on the property. It seemed to like hanging around the rabbit's pen. Both my brother and I saw it there a few times. I took a walk to the edge of our 12 acres and was walking towards my neighbor's pen where they keep their cows. Summer was dying, and the sun was starting to sink behind the tall pines. I saw something about 100 feet ahead of me. This figure was well over 7 foot, all black. The head looked oddly horse-like, so my immediate thought was Jersey Devil. I couldn't fathom what I was seeing. It was on 2 legs, with its legs spread and arms frozen to its side like it was about to run. I picked up a stick and threw it and yelled, 'Hey!' to make sure what I was seeing was real. I confirmed this as it turned its head towards me. At this point, I knew I had to get the hell out of there. I ran until I got to the middle of the trail and stopped to catch my breath. I looked back and saw nothing, heard nothing. It scared me enough to try and get rid of this thing. I purchased a large quantity of sea salt and sage. Every day I went along the trails and cleansed the property with salt water and sage. I blessed the property. It took around 3 weeks before I decided this was enough because we didn't see the shadow anymore. Relief set in, but this was only the beginning. Months went by without incident. It was now summer of my 13th year when I realized this thing went from outside to inside my house. I was afraid to go into the hallway at night to go to the bathroom or go out into the kitchen. I felt like something would grab me. I developed sleep paralysis and would feel something on me, something holding me down. I'd wake up with my chest scratched, my legs and back, and sometimes with large mysterious bruises. These attacks went on for months and there was nothing I could do to stop them. The week leading up to the big showdown, I was being attacked nearly every night. No amount of sage or salt would help. I was going crazy. I went to bed one night and I knew it wasn't going to be good. You could sense trouble. As I laid in bed, I saw darkness manifest on the other side of my room. It was a tall, black shadow. I was immediately paralyzed with fear. It started to come towards me. I felt my eyes forcefully being shut and my breathing was cut off. Usually I could shake this, but tonight I couldn't. I was conscious the entire time, but any functions I tried to do wouldn't work. I felt this thing get on top of me, and what happened next I don't remember exactly, but I was standing up next to my bed. I saw a shadowy blur go through my wall into the hallway, so I followed it. I went through the wall. I went through the wall and out into the hallway where the shadow man was waiting. I was now face to face with this thing. I had to look up to see him. He was tall. He wore an old brown suit. Dirt fell from it and he smelled like earth and rot. His face was round and his flesh was brown and mummified looking. He had an evil smile. It showed his teeth, which were sharp and were covered in yellowing decay. His eyes were a big and bright golden yellow, like a wolf's eyes, and he had on a big hat. I will never forget this, ever. It was so real, and no movie can replicate the horror that stood in front of me. The next part is a little fuzzy, but I remember in the middle of my torso a light emerged. I took this ball of light into my hands and pushed it into this hellish creature. I told it to get out. It didn't belong here. As I pushed this energy into the thing, it flew very hard into my bathroom door and exploded. The explosion shot out all these tiny balls of blue and silver energy. They lingered on the door. I walked out into my kitchen. It was very bright. I remembered thinking, how is this possible? I was very aware of what just happened, and I knew I was on a different plane. I had to check it out. Aside from me, the house was empty, and it was very bright. The TV was on, but it was blurred, and I could hear all these disembodied voices coming from it. I went to the front door, but something told me, do not open it. I knew astral projection was dangerous, and my body was very much in danger if I was gone too long. I decided to go back to my room. I went back into my body and back into reality. I shot up out of bed, drenched in sweat and totally drained. I switched on the light and went out into the hallway. The whole house was dark, but on the bathroom door there was a couple blue and silver orbs, and that was that. After that night, no more attacks, no shadows. It was the most fucked up thing that ever happened to me. I was hesitant about telling people about it for years, but recently I've become more open about it. So yeah, there's my one story. Thoughts? Well, Katie, that is certainly a horrifying tale. If you have any more, we look forward to hearing them. Alright, everybody, now we've come to the part of the show that I'm very fond of. This is where I get to have a very special guest call in and share his or her account of a personal paranormal experience. The very first guest on the very first episode of the 13th Hour happens to be my best friend, Mike Vaccaro. Mike and I go way back, all the way back to elementary school, actually. Mike was best man at my wedding. Mike and I have graduated high school together, hung out of college together, and Mike and I had a very, very interesting experience ghost hunting last year inside of Perth Amboy, New Jersey's Alpine Cemetery. And it's a pleasure for me to have Mike on the air, so let's get around to the interview. So, Mike, I don't have to tell you what I experienced when we went ghost hunting. I know what I saw and what I felt, but basically what I'd like to get from you is your accounts of what happened the couple nights that we went ghost hunting in Perth Amboy. So, if you want to tell our audience, basically just start at the beginning.
Jesse had called me up, and he was coming back to spend a couple of days in New Jersey, and said he wanted to go ghost hunting. I wasn't very into the whole ghost hunting thing. I didn't necessarily believe there were ghosts, but I'm not one of those people that just completely dismisses it. So he talked about going to a cemetery in Perth Amboy. It was called Alpine Cemetery, and me, Jesse, and another one of our friends, Bob, got together, and we went out ghost hunting. So when we got there are two cemeteries. There's one on one side of the street and one on the other side of the street. One is Alpine, and I can't remember the name of the first one.
St. Mary's.
St. Mary's. So we went to St. Mary's first. We really didn't see too much there. A little bit about the weather that night. It was extremely foggy, cold, and kind of damp. It was interesting, kind of ominous. That'll actually play on later in this the story. But we decided to go over into Alpine, which is a fairly large cemetery and relatively old too. I can't remember what the oldest gravestone we saw was, but I know it was in the 1800s, like early 1800s.
Real quick, not to cut you off, but basically in St. Mary's is about roughly a fifth to a quarter the size of Alpine. Alpine's very large. In it, there is an asphalt path that runs down the middle, the rest of it, being the graves and the mausoleums. We were on the asphalt path the whole time, but I swear to God, I kept hearing footsteps in the leaves that were on the grass.
I don't remember hearing any of that. It might have been where I was. I had kind of wandered off a little bit from the group at that point.
Mm-hmm.
I do recall you saying that while we were there, but, I was very dismissive of it because I didn't actually hear it.
Yeah, and we hadn't really gotten into the shit, so to speak, that we would later get into that night in Alpine. That's where things, I think, really exceeded all of our expectations. And that was just the first night. I mean, I don't have to tell you, the second night was where things really got hairy.
Yeah, definitely. The first night, we went to Alpine, and we started walking around. And the first thing we noticed was that out in front of the caretaker's house, there's a patch of grass, oval shaped, probably about 150 feet wide, and there were pinwheels in the ground where there were some memorials. And even though it was foggy, there was absolutely no wind that night. I do remember that very clearly because even though there was no wind, we had started to see the pinwheels move. And that was a little unsettling. Me and Jesse went up a little closer. Bob stayed behind. to investigate. And as soon as we approached the pinwheels, they stopped dead. No wind down from spinning so fast, but just stopped dead. Which that doesn't happen. Doesn't just happen.
I mean, we've been watching them for about a minute. It was going very steady. If it had been something like wind, you would have seen, it gradually get quicker, slower with the speed and intervals of the wind. But it was very steady, and I remember looking at you guys going, is that one of those battery-operated ones that they keep on perpetually? And we all weren't sure, so we decided, okay, let's get a better look at it. And the second we started to walk towards it, it stopped. No gradual wind down, just...
Definitely. It was a very, looking back, it was a really cool precursor to something pretty huge on the second night.
Mm-hmm.
But continuing on with the first night, I know we had definitely seen some, what the hell are they called? Jesse, the shadow people?
Shadow people, they're known as within the paranormal community.
Yes. We saw a couple of the shadow people kind of trailing us. You'd see them poke their heads out of the tree, and then as soon as your gaze turned on them, they were just gone.
Yeah, they seem to dwell within our peripheral vision. And one of the very interesting things about shadow people, it's very interesting, but at the same time it's very unsettling, is there are many camps that say that the shadow people might be demons. There are other camps that say they're restless spirits. Other camps go even further, saying that they're interdimensional travelers or even extraterrestrial beings. To have seen them trailing behind us, I believe it was every night that we were there. I had read about them for years, but it was the first time personally that I had ever seen them.
Yeah, a good thing to point out is that I am not in any real way, I don't want to say associated with the paranormal. It's not a hobby of mine. Now that Jesse has taken me on a, so to speak, adventure, I definitely believe, but it's not something I actively seek out. Although now I'm a little bit more aware of what's going on around me, and I keep a lookout for odd things now.
Well, to be honest, even for me, I've been interested in the paranormal for a very long time. There were a couple houses I lived in when I was younger that I would consider haunted, footsteps in the night, stuff like that. But it was always auditory things, or you'd find things moved later. And when I went ghost hunting with you guys, I figured, okay, well, maybe we'll get a couple EVPs or some orb or mist photos. But this was the first time, as a paranormal investigator, that I had ever seen an apparition in the form of the shadow people, in the form of watching something manipulate the pinwheel. There were also other things that we heard that I'll let you get to, Mike.
We saw a couple more shadow people. There were some more flickering lights, and we had found what we had assumed to be a mysterious symbol on a couple of unmarked headstones.
DBS.
DBS, which we later had found out, what was it, the Dutch brothers and sisters?
It was either the Danish or Dutch brother and sisterhood.
Which would pay for headstones for people who were too poor to afford their own. We had, obviously going ghost hunting, you kind of expect something a little bit more, not devious, but
ominous.
Ominous. When you see specific symbols that you've never seen before. They look kind of Masonic. It's kind of something you just look out for now. Like every time I look at the dollar bill, it always kind of reminds me of angels and demons.
Do you remember what happened when Bob was doing the EVP session and we had noticed these Danish or Dutch brother and sisterhood headstones? What he asked the spirits, and do you remember the response he got?
I don't remember that.
Basically, and this is what the tape shows, the one thing that kind of marked the first visit to Alpine was that while we were there, we didn't experience a lot aside from the shadow people and the pinwheel moving. But when we got home and checked the tape, there was stuff on there. But I do remember, after reviewing the tape, that Bob had asked, can anyone here tell us what DBS means? And on the tape, there's an EVP of two spirits. The first one
Oh, this is the, is it alright or is it safe?
I believe the first voice is confused and says, what? Like very, very, very short burst, like very terse, like what? And then the other voice, which sounds like either a child or a woman, it sounds like they're crying and says, is it okay? Almost like they're asking the other spirit there if it was okay to answer Bob.
Yeah, I do remember that. You know, I haven't seen the tape in a while, but, you know, after we had gone ghost hunting, there was some drinking involved.
That was basically the extent of the first night. Let's move on to the second night that we decided to investigate Alpine. Because if I remember correctly, we decided to bypass St. Mary's altogether, right?
Oh yeah, we had determined that St. Mary's didn't really hold any value. Didn't hold any value, but we had definitely sensed more of a presence at Alpine.
Mm-hmm.
So we loaded up with our gear, you know, all of our cameras and such. The first night we only had one camera. It was far more misty than the first night, and when we got there, we entered in through a different area. The first place we went to a mausoleum. It was sad to say, it was kind of desecrated. There were, you know, beer bottles and Coke cans and things like that thrown into the opening in one of the sides. Bob got some pictures of that. We had spoken to the spirits, so to speak, and he tried to make contact. But after nothing happened, we actually ended up moving further into the mist, and there was kind of an odd lighting behind one of these gravestones that had a fairly large cross on it that was projected onto the mist. You know, it kind of looked like something out of a movie. We had been in the cemetery the night before, so you would immediately think that going back in, you'd feel that sense of familiarity with the terrain and where you were, but this was like a completely different place. Like, as soon as we walked through the gate, it felt different. There was a different attitude.
It was like they knew we were back.
Yeah, and it kind of felt like a negative energy as well, you know. As the night progressed, as we were moving through the cemetery, you had this kind of feeling that we weren't welcome.
It was like back when we were in high school and we would show up at those parties and I was like, these fucking guys again.
Exactly. Yeah, it was definitely unsettling, especially as we walked further in. As we progressively went further back, the age of the cemetery also progressed. It was getting progressively older as you ventured further in. We got to a large mausoleum, and we heard a knock on the door after Bob had questioned the spirit dwelling within the mausoleum. He said, if you're able to make a sound or something, let us know that you're here. Please do so. And we heard a fairly loud knock at the door of the mausoleum.
And the way that it was reverberating, the sound was reverberating, you could tell that knock came from the inside, and it was reverberating off of the stone walls of the mausoleum.
Exactly. It was kind of nerve-wracking, especially for me, someone who doesn't necessarily believe in spirits and everything. At that time, you know, it's like this is challenging a belief that you know, these things don't necessarily exist. So it was very unsettling for me, and I just kind of stood there and filmed. You know, I didn't say anything. I didn't do it. I was kind of very taken aback by it. And as continued to question, I know that we captured a couple more voices on the video cameras.
Well, not just that. The real creepy thing, and I didn't see this until weeks later when I was editing the film together with headphones, but as we approached that crypt, you can hear what sounds like stones moving around inside the crypt.
It was quite strange. It was a very different experience.
Yeah.
That's not even the most unsettling part. After examining more and more of the graveyard, the fog became progressively thicker and more, you know, it kind of weighed down on you. You could barely see in front of you. We decided that we should leave, go and get something to eat, you know, have some coffee and some cigarettes and some talking, you know, like have a conversation about what just happened. And as we were making our way out of the cemetery, we had just shut off our camera equipment because we were nearing the gate. And at the moment Bob had turned off his camera, we heard 4 very loud groans or howls. I really don't even know how to describe it, but they were very clear, and they weren't made by an animal. It sounded very human, and it scared the living crap out of me, to be completely honest. I had goosebumps, I had chills run down my spine. I felt, very tense. Everything in my body just clenched up. And I kind of turned around and looked over at Jesse and Bob, and I said, "Did you hear that?" And Bob had went to turn his camera back on, and that was about the time that the last howl had sounded. Bob had gotten his camera on, and then it just stopped. Extremely, extremely unsettling. We stuck around for another minute or so, trying to figure out if we could get a response. At that time, you had said to me, "All right, let's get the hell out of here." And we proceeded to leave and examine the footage and came up with I think the second night, Bob had come up with a picture of the face in the mist, which is very, I don't want to say fearful, but angry and pained grimace. Kind of, like get out.
We had been in there for that long trying to get a response with our EVP session, and the second that we turned our cameras off, they gave us the scare of our lives. To me, that was just, all right, they know what we're doing. They're not here to be our entertainment. They want us out.
Who's to say, about the afterlife? I definitely got the feeling that we weren't welcome there. I mean, the first night, it kind of seemed like they weren't angry with us for being there. They thought we were just curious. And because we found somewhat of a response, we came back. Maybe they didn't expect that, and they felt like it was kind of an invasion of their space.
And like idiots, we went back 2 nights later, and we brought more people.
And I think at that point they were just like, you know what, screw these guys, we're not even going to give them anything anymore.
Well, I still have to go through roughly 4 hours of tape from that third night, and for all I know, there might be something waiting on there. But the one thing that I do remember was we brought Caitlin, our friend from high school there, as a bit of a control for the experiment, because she had heard we went ghost hunting and wanted to come along. So I remember I pulled you guys aside before we got her, and said, "Listen, no one say anything about what we experienced there the last 2 nights, because I want to use her as the control and see if she experiences anything that we did." And sure enough, she said to me, "You're going to think I'm crazy, but I keep seeing shadows ducking out from behind the graves and running back and forth out of the corner of my eye."
Yeah, there's definitely something going on at Alpine. I don't think it was a one-off experience where, you go once and there's something, and then every time you go back subsequently, you won't find anything. I think there's definitely some paranormal activity in that area.
Given your experiences paranormal investigating inside Alpine Cemetery in Amboy, here's a question we all want to know. Would you go back?
I would.
Telling the story here on the air, we run the risk of attracting attention to Alpine. Do you honestly have any words of warning to any would-be paranormal investigators that would go to this place after hearing our accounts?
Be careful. Don't trespass somewhere. The gates were open when we went, but if the gates are closed and something like that happens, don't risk getting arrested. And as far as the ground conditions, there are a couple places where there are dips and like some holes in the grass that someone can kind of twist their ankle on. So, always be sure of your footing and where you're at, look around you.
I find it very interesting that after everything that we experienced there, your concerns, your words of warning were, don't get caught by the cops and wear a good shoe with traction, because, you might slip. And finally, before you go, Mike, considering that we went there with the best of intentions and we were very respectful during our investigation, and still we were scared off, if people went there and basically just screwed around in there, they were completely disrespectful, would you be concerned that they would bring a presence with them, or that something might happen to them there?
I don't think something would happen to them there, but I think that they would bring about a presence that's not so welcoming of them. I know just asking, simple questions was eliciting, knocks on mausoleums and all of that. So, going in and, being disrespectful is definitely something I would warn against, because the spirits, even us with good intentions, they kind of took it in I wouldn't say a threatening way, but in an invasive way. So yeah, definitely, tread carefully and, be respectful. But I would say that for all situations in life, imagine how you would feel if you were one of those spirits and somebody came around every night and pestered you to, hey, do a trick. It's definitely, don't use it as necessarily as a source of entertainment, let's go poke fun at the ghosts.
Well, all right, Mike, I want to thank you for appearing on the very first episode of the 13th Hour. Hopefully on the next episode we'll have Bob on so he can share his experiences at Alpine with us. And it looks like we're going to be wrapping up. Tune in next time, folks.